Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of the Ride Along Radio Show. My name is George Holt. Today it's just me and Kent. Gil's out on canine training today, so we're going to jump into our show. As you all know, the Ride Along Radio Show is basically designed to provide a platform for us to address issues that impact both the police and the community in ways that are significant. And we can address those issues here because we don't have any agenda. We don't have any department talking points, and there's nobody to hold our feet to the fire if we say something that someone may deem to be politically incorrect. So we're using the benefit of our police experience and our own political perspectives. And today you have both sides of the spectrum pretty much on almost every issue you can think of. And we're going to talk about today. Actually, our topic today is use of deadly force, but we'll get into that a little bit later. How's it going today, Kent?
I'm doing great, George. How about you?
Good. So we start off with the news of the day every week. And many of you know what's been going on with the university. Actually, not the University of Missouri. Yeah, actually, it is University of Missouri, or MU as they call it. They had a situation, for those who don't know, where some of the football players, actually many of the African-American students on campus, were unhappy with how the president handled some racial incidents that had happened on campus. And they demanded that he resign. And they said if he didn't resign, that they were going to go on strike and not play football. And as you know, for a school like that, that's a big moneymaker. So in the wake of this protest, the university president stepped down. Well, there were some people who weren't too happy about that, and there was a backlash. There were people who went online and made some comments that were obviously fueled by resentment. Some of those comments were fueled by racism. And there was a lot of commentary made by that on social media, various platforms. Well, it got to the point where, and this is the news of the day, is that the campus police decided that they would have people report those incidents to them so that they could go after the people who were making those comments on social media. And I'm actually going to read to you the actual press release from the University of Missouri Campus Police. To continue to ensure that the University of Missouri campus remains safe, the MU Police Department, MUPD, is asking individuals who witness incidents of hateful and or hurtful speech or actions to, A, call the police immediately. They give the phone number. If it's an emergency, they say dial 911. Give the communications operator a summary of the incident, including location. Provide a detailed description of the individuals involved. Provide a license plate and vehicle descriptions, if appropriate. If possible, and it can be done safely, take a photo of the individuals with your cell phone. Delays, including posting information on social media, can often reduce the chances of identifying the responsible parties. And here's the important part, and even they admit this, while cases of hateful and hurtful speech are not crimes, if the individuals identified are students, the MU's Office of Student Conduct can take disciplinary action. Okay. Well, I'm glad that they admit that that's not crimes, which means that to me, in my professional opinion and my personal opinion, which is informed by my professional experiences, the police shouldn't be getting involved in anything that aren't crimes. This goes back to comments I made a few weeks ago when we covered the Spring Valley High School incident in South Carolina. There are issues with the police being called in when the police are right there at a place, be it an airport, be it a shopping mall, being a school campus. The people who work there, whose job it is to enforce order and enforce rules, tend to look at it as, well, we have the police here now, so we'll just call the police for every little thing that happens that we don't like. And this is a perfect example of that. These things are not crimes, but they're telling people to call the police and report them as if they are crimes. To me, that's a slow step toward the encroachment of people's First Amendment rights. If I say something you don't like, it could be hateful, it could be hurtful. I could drop all kind of racist comments, and you're going to call the police? Really? If I'm not disturbing the peace while I'm doing it, which usually means I'm behaving in a boisterous manner, using profanity or whatever, there's all kind of definitions of disturbing the peace.
They're usually fighting words when you're talking about a breach of the peace, in violation of First Amendment.
So, but people are saying hateful or hurtful things. What is that? Where do we draw the line on that? I mean,
one generation to the next, since we've obviously created a whole generation of them who have had their feelings hurt about everything because they're little mommy and daddy, little kids, a generation of spoiled little kids who've never had any adversity in their lives, who have been given trophies for just showing up and participating because we don't want to hurt their feelings.
I was going to say that. These are the ones that get the trophies for participating in soccer, whether they played or not or did well
lily
or not.
white liberal kids, offspring of other libs, that now we're talking about multiple generations of them.
Well, that's not just them, though. It seems like we have an entire generation
it's infected other people. And
people who are butthurt about everything.
It doesn't remain within one group.
Right.
It affects everything, just like homeless or just like one-parent families do. That's spread everywhere. It's a disease. Nothing ever gets better. It always gets worse. That's what this is. Well, it's just getting worse.
Let me give the call-in info. Actually, you can tweet us. We actually have a call-in guest today. Our in-studio guest today is going to be a use of force expert as we discuss the use of deadly force. But if you have any questions or you'd like to comment on us beside being in the social feed on the website, you can send us a tweet at Right Along Radio, or you can call in 323-293-3375. Go ahead, Ken.
I'd like to comment just a little bit more on the situation at the University of Missouri. One of the articles today, and this is on the Blaze Network, that's Glenn Beck's website, it talks about black demonstrators are segregating white allies to form a black-only healing space. So now these little lily white knuckleheads, who are the tools of these activists, the black activists on campus, are now being told that, by the way, we appreciate that you're down for the cause, but did you know that you're white? And because that you're white, you need to get away from us. You're not a quote, you're not right? Black.
That's not a quote.
No, but here I am. I'm reading it, so I'm going to make a statement about what I think about it. What a bunch of idiots! They're tools. They're being used as tools. They're generally uneducated. You talk to these people, they can't make sense about anything why they think that they're there.
Well, you say uneducated. I mean, college students are typically pretty informed, especially when they take up social causes.
You think idiots don't go to college?
Oh, of course. Of course.
You're giving way too much credit.
That doesn't wipe away the idiocy because you're in a formalized learning environment. But I'm just saying that typically students, they experience this awakening as they see this new world in front of them, and they get involved. And maybe they haven't thought it all the way through.
They get swept away by the events.
Pretty informed.
Yeah, well, they're not.
Well, in this case, I think that it's unfair. First of all, that's racism, and I don't. People talk about reverse racism. There's no such thing as reverse racism. To me,
it's just discrimination.
It's just racism. It's just racism. It's just discrimination, and it's not reverse this or reverse that because it's all equally wrong. But you can't welcome the help of your white former fellow students or your white friends, and then when it comes time for you to have a conversation where you're open and honest about your feelings, you exclude them. I mean, let's not forget the white people who died alongside black people during the civil rights movement. Let's not forget that those kids would be facing the same disciplinary issues as everyone else while they're out there protesting.
You can, if you have a reason to do this.
No, it's not.
And here's the reason. They're racist themselves.
Yeah,
George.
well, that's pretty obvious. Anytime you try to exclude somebody, that's pretty obvious. But I'm saying that it's not right.
No, it's not right.
And somebody needs to be called on that.
And here's another person. Here's somebody with some sense, and sense in reality seems to be catching up to the university. They've had one woman resign for violating the First Amendment rights of a school reporter and who also is a stringer for ESPN. A second woman that was involved in that issue, who works for the campus, I believe she's a professor. She's being brought up on some type of ethics charges. She's being investigated.
Now,
by
we say
campus.
ethics, we mean legal ethics charges, or are we talking about
campus ethics?
Campus stuff. Okay.
Okay. Well, and she's also a government official because she works for a state university.
That's why I'm asking you.
She's violated, and the school is responsible for her behavior out on the campus. So they're taking steps against her. There's a professor who, and I'm going to bring up the full article here so I can say that this guy's name is Dale Brigham, an associate professor of nutrition and exercise physiology, who wrote an email to students.
This is at MU?
At the University of Missouri.
Right.
Some students felt like they wouldn't be safe coming to class. They didn't want to come to class because the campus is unsafe. The professor said, I will be there. There will be an exam administered in our class. And he implored his students to stand up to the bullies on campus. If you give in to bullies, he says, they win. The only way bullies are defeated is by standing up to them. He let them know that, in fact, there would be a later exam. He came back later, so there'll be a later.
You can make up if you don't feel safe.
That's right. Okay. And it'll be cool. Here. You can take the exam. It won't be held against you. But by the way, I'm resigning. I'm done.
Okay.
He's walking. Now the campus.
Now but see, that's somebody I can respect.
Absolutely.
Because that's somebody who's willing to walk it like they talk it. People talk about things and they want to have it both ways. They wanted to go this way, but they wanted to go for them too. If you feel that strongly about it, you stop taking that check and you walk.
Yeah, but he's contradicting himself in a way. He's saying stand up to the bullies. Right. He didn't do that. He bailed. He bailed.
No, he did because he did that at personal sacrifice.
Well, who the hell would who wants to sacrifice your career for somebody else? Why don't you make them sacrifice their career?
Somebody who's real.
Why don't you make them sacrifice their position at the school? Why don't we get rid of the troublemakers in the school? Why doesn't he stand up?
Well,
why doesn't he stand up and say, you know what, watch this?
Now, right? He's in the national media, and we're talking about him now because he took a stand. I have to respect that, man.
Yeah, but now he's gone, and there are less voices in the fight. He's talking about a fight. He's now gone.
Well, I think that he made.
I appreciate the first part about what he said, but I don't appreciate the last part about what he did.
I think he made a splash, and he showed that he was real, and he was willing to put his money where his mouth was. Literally, put his money where his mouth was. Okay, so you guys may be wondering, how does that tie in to police-community relations? It does because, again, we started off talking about how police get dragged into something that is really a concern for those who are responsible for administering and enforcing rules, not laws. Police, law enforcement, administrators at schools, teachers, deans, university presidents, they're responsible for enforcing the rules. And when you start having the police show up and respond to incidents that are not crimes, you're asking for trouble. It's a slippery slope. And we're asking now, now there's a concern that someone will be prosecuted or persecuted for exercising their First Amendment rights because somebody said something that was hurtful to somebody else. And hurtful could be anything. You could talk about the way somebody's hair is parted that day and that they deem that hurtful. You know, I mean, what do you do? Hate speech is one thing, and hate speech is certainly not protected. But hurtful speech?
Like I say, in the police car, it was all on. We said it all.
Well, that's
just
two people
about.
who know each other and speaking.
Well,
yeah,
but you need to get to know each other. You know, it would be better if they went completely the opposite direction and let everybody's feelings get hurt and let that shake out than to follow this path that we're taking right now. This is more like national suicide. We don't have a good track record with that. Well, now they're going to other campuses, and like I say, this is a mental disorder and it's a disease, and it is going to other campuses. They're trying to organize other campuses to do the same thing. Now, who exactly is going to stand up and do something? But it's not the professor who just resigned.
Let me ask you a question. When you say do the same thing in terms of like what the football team did to boycott, you mean, or what?
Organize yourselves to shut down a campus, to strong-arm people, to get them to do exactly what you want them to do and make the world just the way you want it, okay?
How is this any different than somebody boycotting Walmart? Those students are the customers of that university. And if the football players even have a little more clout because they're actually generating additional money for the school, way and above whatever scholarship money.
You know where most of that money? You know where most of that money? You know where most of that money comes from? Taxpayers. That's a university, a public university.
Hold on.
Don't waste my money
but you
on
can
this.
Say that about almost anything.
Yes, I can. I can vote. I can vote for my money.
You still have people who are going to that school and they're paying for their education. They are the customer base of that school. So they have a right to express themselves.
They are a very small percentage of the total population of that school. They're 40,000.
Then how could they shut it down then? Then what's the big deal? If they're that small, then how could they shut it down?
They're doing it. What do you mean, how are they doing it? We're watching it.
I'm saying
we're watching people being intimidated, for goodness sakes.
Nobody cared until the football team got involved. We're going to have to go to a break. We're going to get into our use of deadly force topic today, and we're going to have our guest on deck to jump in when we get back, and we're going to have a video queued up to show you guys as well. And we're going to talk about basically use of deadly force. When we say that, we're talking about the guidelines under which police officers can use deadly force, typically their firearms. There seems to be a lot of confusion about that, and we just kind of wanted to address that and clear it up. So we'll be right here on Ride Along Radio. See you in a minute. All right, welcome back to the Ride Along Radio Show. Today's topic is the use of deadly force. And again, when we speak about the use of deadly force, we're talking about the guidelines under which police officers can legally use deadly force. And there's a couple of different terminologies that have been in vogue over my 25-year career. It used to be called the escalation of force. And basically it said that you started off with everything from verbal control, giving someone directions, to a firm grip, putting it on their arm, to impact weapons, would be a baton, or even chemical weapons, which would be a mace or something like that. This is pre the advent of the taser, or the widespread use of the taser. And then and it culminated with the use of deadly force, which again is typically employed with a firearm, although I've known of cases and known officers involved in cases where they used deadly force and they did not use a firearm for that. So we have a situation where that kind of evolved, because escalation tends to suggest that you escalate typically, and it doesn't leave any room in the officer's mindset that the officer can come back down. So what we've done, what happened eventually, was the use of force model was changed to be called the continuum, the use of force continuum. And what that does is it gives officers the message, and it gives them the mindset that you don't have to continually escalate force. You can go back and forth on that scale as you need to, without continually escalating until you get to deadly force, or you get to great bodily injury with someone. So we actually have a guest today, and I'll let Kent introduce our guest. He's an esteemed guest, and we're happy to have him.
Hi, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Ron McCarthy, who is a call-in guest today for the show. Ron is retired from the Los Angeles Police Department after about 24 years of service. He was an officer, supervisor, and assistant commander of the LAPD SWAT team in the LAPD's Emergency Response Division, also known as the Metropolitan Division. So in the capacity, when he worked there, he dealt with floods, fires, earthquakes, multiple riots, major violent events that were both domestic and terrorist-driven. Upon his retirement, he became the Chief of Tactical Operations for the United States Department of Energy. From there, he went on to serve as the Director of the Advanced Studies for the International Association of Chiefs of Police, also known as the IACP, and also the IACP's National Institute of Justice Deadly Force Training Program. He serves as a trainer for the Safariland Training Group. He's also an adjunct professor at the Fullerton College Police Training Academy. Ron's also a court-qualified expert witness in the areas of SWAT and police use of force and use of deadly force. He's also a Medal of Valor winner. He goes back quite a ways. He won the Medal of Valor dealing with the Symbionese Liberation Organization, also known as the SLA, which was an event that involved Patty Hearst, if you can remember this. And there was an incident where there was a violent shootout with the SLA members in Los Angeles that he was a part of. So his experience is pretty deep. I've known Ron for quite a long time. He had a very interesting life growing up as an orphan, living in a railroad car. He probably doesn't want me talking about that. Then he was essentially raised by his high school football coach, went into the Navy, later to the Los Angeles Police Department. So he is a kind of a bootstrap, old-time Irish guy who has a lot of very interesting things to say. I've always known him to be a very straight shooter. We'd like to welcome Ron onto the show. Ron, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Thanks for joining us, Ron. This is George.
No problem.
Ron, did I do a good job, Ron? Is there something I forgot?
Yeah, you could have left out the early years.
Well, we're having you on the show because we're going to introduce a couple of officer-involved shootings, and this is your forte. Ron speaks to large groups of people about the use of force. He also is a lot of times brought in by police departments to help improve their use of force policies and training. So he usually calls it like it is. It doesn't matter where it falls in the pendulum. He has good things and bad things to say. He has a lot of people that love him, and there's some people that possibly don't like him because we consider him to be a very straight shooter. With that, I'm going to turn you back over to George. I think George wants to introduce a couple things here.
And Ron, I actually wanted to put that out there because we have received some criticism on the show. These guys are always showing the police perspective, and they're always putting themselves out there as a victim. And I just want to reinforce for everyone that Ron is an expert who testifies in court cases, and he'll call it however it is. And it's not a matter of always defending the police, because, Ron, there's been cases where you found the police officer acted inappropriately or incorrectly, correct?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
And so can you give us without getting into names or whatever, an instance where something like that occurred, where you said, hey, sorry, but the officer didn't do his job properly, or his or her job properly?
Well, the most recent is an incident, a shooting of a Mr. Moore in Memphis, Tennessee, and in my opinion, it was improper and handled poorly, and it was the fault of the police in that particular situation. So that's one.
Okay, yeah, I mean, and again, the importance of Ron's credibility as an expert witness is that he's not the guy who's always going to come down and say things one way or the other. And you have expert witnesses who do that, and it seems that they're hired guns to not necessarily get at the truth, but to get at whoever's paying them the most, that's how they're going to interpret it. I just want to put that out there, that Ron's not one of those individuals. And the case I actually had in mind was a different case than the one you're talking about. So that's more than one case right off the top of my head that we've had Ron, or people have had Ron come in, and maybe he didn't give them the answers that they were actually looking for. But he's just going to call it like it is, because he doesn't like us. He's retired, and he's not beholden to any agency or any agency's talking points, and he's going to talk about it. So. Actually, we have a video. We have the video queued up. Okay, we're gonna have some video footage we're gonna show later on. But Ron, I spoke about the use of force continuum, and actually the definition I was using is loosely the one that the National Institute of Justice puts out there. And you being a use of force expert for them, can you kind of explain that maybe a little better than I did in terms of what the use of force continuum looks like to a civilian?
Well, generally speaking, use of force continuums have word explanations to describe what the performance of an officer should be and how it should be calculated, both on the part of the officer at the time and then later in review of the incident by people who are evaluating it, department leadership and management, etc. They can be drawn up as a thermometer, if you will, or a pie chart. But essentially, they're all based on one thing, and that's Garner versus Tennessee. And that is a reasonable officer's observations and a reasonable officer's actions in regard to utilizing force or deadly force. The activity of the officer must be reasonable. And the reasonable man concept is something that would be judged with each incident.
Now, you said reasonable officer, and I know that they put that in there as opposed to just saying reasonable person, because there are certain things that an officer may cue to, or key on rather, and based on their training and experience, they may make decisions that a layman would not make in that scenario, correct? Exactly.
If I can give you a quick example.
Please do.
There was an officer in Seattle, Officer Kelly, and Officer Kelly was investigating a stolen car that was parked near a curb, but not parked at the curb. And as he got out late at night to investigate it, he was approached by an individual, and the officer saw him walking deliberately towards him. And the officer yelled at him to stop, stop. He said it twice as he drew his gun, recognizing that late at night, connection with the stolen car, and this individual's walking directly towards him and refusing to stop. In addition to that, the hands of the suspect were going underneath a sweatshirt. The officer shot him because he was evaluating those hand movements as being consistent with retrieving a gun from a concealed area in the waistband. Other officers got there, they pulled up the sweatshirt, and there was the gun of one of the dead officers who had been murdered.
Wow.
The 4 dead officers who had been murdered in the coffee spot in Tacoma, Washington.
Right, I remember that.
Before.
I remember that.
Now, if the officer hadn't used his training and experience and waited for the gun to present itself, would the officer have survived this incident? And that's a rhetorical question. The point I want to make is that officers try to use their training to shoot at the threat of the attack, not waiting till you're attacked, because if you're waiting until you are attacked, you may be too late to save yourself. So you try to use your training and experience to recognize the threat of an attack before it happens.
Well, and and everything we know about human reaction time and the suspect taking the initiative and everything else we know about use of deadly force, obviously you don't want to wait until somebody doesn't have to shoot at you before you can shoot back, essentially. Somebody doesn't have to point a gun at you before you can present your own gun. And well, let me ask you this, Ron, and we say it all the time, and people have asked us on this show, but and I'd like to hear this. I'd like for you to say this or answer this question. So when somebody has a gun or they have a knife, how come the police don't just shoot them in the leg or the arm? We get that all the time. And I'm trying not to laugh as I ask you this question because obviously I know the answer, but I'd like for people to hear it from the use of force expert.
Well, number one, shooting anybody, any place, but in the head, making contact with the brain, doesn't ensure that the suspect will stop. For example, the FBI agents who were murdered, Agents Grogan and Dove in Miami during the FBI shootout with suspects Platt and Maddox, the suspect Platt had 9 fatals impacting in him and was going to die from those 9 fatals.
Eventually,
but
yes.
Those 2 FBI agents before he did expire. So the point I want to make is that even body shots are not a guarantee, and those 9 fatals were in this individual's body. So shooting somebody in an arm or a leg does not stop them from continuing to attack and kill you. So therefore, officers are trained to shoot at, first of all, the largest target presented by the suspect, which is usually the upper body, the chest area, the stomach area. And they're told to shoot at that portion of the body because it's the largest target. And shooting people as an officer who is being threatened, you're doing that with your heart rate up at 170 beats a minute. In other words, it's like a citizen involved in a traffic accident that's just starting, and they slam on the brakes, their heart rate leaps up into 170 beats a minute. They freeze and try to drive away from the accident and avoid it. It's a very scary experience. Well, that's a similar circumstance to an officer being involved in a deadly force confrontation. It's very hard to be precise, and shooting arms and legs is not a solution because that may not stop the offender.
Right. So even if you, first of all, you're not very likely to hit somebody in the arm or leg. Even if you were to hit them in the arm or the leg, it still wouldn't have the desired effect.
And you have to account for the rounds that are being fired too. I mean, it's not easy to hit a moving target, and a leg is typically a moving target.
And if the legs are moving, typically the arms are moving too. And as Kent just pointed out, you have to, and this is for the benefit of our audience, of course, every time a police officer pulls a trigger, they have to have a reason as to why they sent that bullet out of the barrel of their gun into the city environment or whatever environment they happen to work in. Why did you discharge your firearm? And you have to explain why you fired each one of those rounds. I mean, it's not just let loose a barrage of rounds and hope you hit that person in the arm or the leg.
That's a very good point. In addition to that point is that the average hit factor for police officers in the United States is around 28 to 32%.
Wow.
In other words, at distances of from almost contact out to about 12 feet, which is where most shootings happen, a good portion, about 2/3 of the rounds will miss because of the stress and pressure and the environment that the officer is under. Now, fortunately, suspects don't shoot much straighter either, so that helps.
Right,
but,
right.
Ron?
That's the real world.
Ron, what we'd like to do, due to time constraints here, is we'd like to move directly to the 2 shootings that we'd like to talk about today. is the first shooting that we have up is
that Dallas?
Dallas. Very good. Ron, did you watch the Dallas video? Dallas.
Yes, I did.
Okay, it's rolling now.
Okay, we're rolling it, and so people are going to be watching this. When we're done, we'd like you to comment on it.
No problem.
Okay, there's no sound, but what we have is so to give you the narration, it's body cam footage of 2 Dallas PD officers that show up on the scene. They've called to a house by a mother who says her son is having mental problems. Or actually, he has mental problems, and he is behaving in a bizarre manner.
And he has a history of this as well.
Yeah, here we go.
Whitmire cry? Whitmire cry? Oh, he didn't want to spend the money.
Hello. What's going on?
How you doing, man? What's going on?
Oh, he's just off the chain. Incoherent. Who's that? We're chopping up people in the sun. Bipolar schizo. What's going on?
You drop that for me? Drop that for me, guy.
Jay!
Drop it!
Jay!
Drop it!
Jay! That's your Oh, you can't watch out! Oh, you can't watch out!
Bravo 7
Drop it!
Shots fired. Cover code 3.
Okay, we're cutting it.
Drop that!
Drop it!
Drop it!
So, what happened after that? It was eventually medical crew getting there, them securing the suspect. There's also a lot of talk about are you getting your representative here on the scene because they've just been involved in a shooting. You can see the close proximity to how this happened and what little time the officers have to react, and their vision is being obscured by the mother at the door. The suspect is right on top of them. The medical officials that showed up shared with the officers that they had been there 2 weeks before because this person has an entire history of this, is a violent person and is mentally ill. I think the last time it may have involved a knife or a gun and another family member, including his brother. Ron, tell us, is this a good shooting or a bad shooting? Legally, were they in policy, and why?
Well, let me clarify before we go forward. We use a lot of police terminology, and we have to be mindful that people don't always track with us. When we say a good shooting, not that it's good to ever put bullets into another human being's body, but we say good in terms of does it fall within the acceptable guidelines of the law and of the police department's regulations and policies. So when we say good shooting, we mean that it's a clean shooting, and bad shooting means that it's not a good shooting. That's what we mean by that.
So now everybody's trained on that. We don't need to do that again, right? Okay, here we go. Go ahead, Ron.
The shooting is well within the national standards of ethics and police training and police use of force, and it's totally consistent with the law. It is a shooting that you would hope wouldn't happen. It all depends on the circumstances and how things unfold. It's obvious that this young man was emotionally disturbed. Paranoid schizophrenic in all probability. Paranoid schizophrenics are people that we look at with some level of sympathy because they're born with a problem and the problem is severe and it will ruin their lives and the lives of other people who care for them and love them. But paranoid schizophrenics go into the Aurora, Colorado movie theater and murder multiple people. And this individual with an item that can penetrate the chest cavity and reach the heart of the officer or penetrate his neck and sever his blood veins in his neck, and he can bleed out.
Well, you know, Ryan, and
the officer has to shoot at.
And I think it's important that we make that distinction because people say, well, we had a screwdriver, and everybody has screwdrivers in their homes, and they don't realize the deadly potential that a tool like that has to be used as a weapon. Now, one of the questions that I fielded on social media about this is why didn't they use the taser? They had a taser available to them. Why didn't they use the taser? What's your take on that, Ryan?
The answer to that question is that the officer is doing what he's trained to do and doing what the law provides. And that is he's facing a deadly threat, and he's using a deadly response, a deadly force response. That's his training. And that's now, if he chooses to put his life at risk to use the taser, then that's his personal choice. But it should not be an expectation that an officer confront a deadly threat with a use of force that may fail.
Well, and that's the
And
thing too.
The taser has a failure factor. It doesn't work in some people. Also, the taser has to impact and be successful. It may not be when we have clothing on. It's going to be mitigated by heavy clothing. It doesn't work as well when we have heavy clothing because it doesn't make contact with the body in the way that it's designed to be effective.
And you can see how close the officers are to the threat by the time that they realize the threat is in front of them. Things happen very, very, very quickly. And in just a matter of feet, you can see how fast the individual with the screwdriver in his hands closed on those officers. Use of a taser at that moment wasn't even practical.
Well, let's talk about this too. Even if they had approached there with the taser in their hand already, at the distance that the subject appeared at the door, because remember he walked up behind the mother, there is such thing as being too close for the taser to be as effective as it should be, because the way a taser works is two darts come out, and the darts need to be spread apart in order to get that proper arc to affect enough muscle mass to make the person go rigid, to do its job as an electromuscular disruption device. So the distance they were, it wasn't enough range for the taser darts to spread out far enough to be as effective as it should be. So when you say it's iffy, even if it had been connected properly, even if the guy didn't have a shirt on, we still would have had an issue where the taser still might not have worked. So that's why we didn't see the use of a taser in this incident.
Ron, unless you have something really quick to say, we'd like to move on to the second shooting because I want to set this up before the video starts.
We don't have that. We don't have that video up at this point.
Okay. Do you think we're going to? We're not. Okay. For the listeners, we can still talk about the shooting because the listeners can find on, I believe it's PennLive.com has done an extensive coverage of this particular shooting. But this shooting happened out in Hummelstown, Pennsylvania, I believe in 2012. Hummelstown is a small town, population 4,360. It's 1.4 square miles. On the website for the police department, there are 5 officers, I believe, and a chief, if that is still correct. There was a female officer that was on patrol, uniform patrol, when she saw a traffic violation occur, or somebody, the vehicle was probably in violation having to do with the registration. She tried to effect a stop. The individual who was driving the car, David Kasich, refused to stop, and there was a short pursuit that terminated at Kasich's sister's house, at which time both the suspect and the officer exited their vehicles and there was contact. The contact included video, uniform cam video showing the female officer tasing Kasich and putting him on the ground due to the taser, the effect of the taser. He was repeatedly tased while she was yelling commands. And I won't talk about this part at this moment about the heightened emotional state of the officer. However, after repeated tasings and orders for him to put his hands to where they can be seen, at some point the officer claims that he went for his waist area. He was on his stomach. He was slightly turned to his left while being tased repeatedly and probably obviously not having control of his body and being able to comply many times with the orders. Other times he was. He did make some kind of a move for his waistband. She thought he was either trying to take the taser probes off or going for a weapon. There was no indication that he was carrying a weapon at that point. However, the claims of his refusal to stop furtive movements, etc., led to, after repeated tasings, her shooting the individual in the back twice while he was on the ground. The officer was prosecuted by the district attorney of that county. First time apparently he's done a prosecution for an officer-involved shooting. Let me
interject this really quick. Anybody who wants to look this up, the officer's name is, it'd be easy to find it maybe if you use the officer's name, Lisa Merkel, and Merkel is spelled M-E-A-R-K-L-E. So M-E-A-R-K-L-E, Lisa Merkel. It's not a common name, so you can pull up that
you can
footage
find
for
it on
yourself.
PennLive.com. They've followed. There's several links for the video. It's only about 2 minutes and 52 seconds in total.
But it's actually body cam footage. And actually, our first show we talked about body cam footage, and it's been a great tool for this sort of thing.
Merkel was tried on third-degree murder charges, but there were other accompanying charges to include a lesser charge of manslaughter. I can't remember if it was involuntary manslaughter or a straight manslaughter charge. After, I think, 3 days of deliberations, she was found not guilty. And there was plenty of information about even the foreman of the jury talking about the decision of why they did not find her guilty. During the first 6 hours of deliberations the first day, it was a 50-50 split on whether the jury believed that Merkel was guilty or not guilty as charged, probably, I'm sure, starting with the third-degree murder charge. Ron, I'm going to say this, and maybe I can set somebody off here as something to discuss. I have trouble with this shooting for several different reasons. She's very lucky she did not end up in prison. She did have some legitimate arguments as to her reasons for use of force. I have problems with it because the fact of a small town environment and possibly even the officer in question being a female officer, some of these things come into question in terms of her ability to. And when I say female officer in this particular case, I'm dealing individually, not broad brushing females in general. Certain male officers have, obviously a hard time dealing with things and make mistakes as well. But all of these things go through my mind in terms of whether this was a good shooting or not. I had problems. I thought she could have done other things before she shot this guy.
Ron, did you seen the video?
Yes, I did.
And what's your take on that?
There's too much. First of all, it's a very disturbing video because you are watching somebody being tased continuously. And that continuous tase involves somebody writhing around on the ground and screaming because they're in a significant level of discomfort.
Ron, hang on one second. We may actually have the footage up.
Usually,
we do have
hey, Ron, hold on just a sec. Ron?
It's like a leg cramp and through your entire body. And so it's disturbing. What the jury would know and get, in all probability, that is not here in the video, is the download from the taser. Was it used properly? There's a 5-second cycle to the taser. Unless we pull the trigger again, if we pull the trigger again, it starts the 5-second cycle all over again. And there's a question as to whether that taser was continuously used to the point that it was very difficult for the individual to stop moving. 5-second tase, and then it stops automatically unless we re-engage the trigger. The only way we would know that is if we had the download, the electronic download from the taser itself. Certainly a jury and the prosecutor would have that.
And that's what actually it's for, and people may not realize this. Whenever an officer deploys a taser, two things happen. Three things. In addition to the darts actually being deployed from the cartridge, there is a bunch of tiny little pieces of confetti that come out. And every little piece of confetti has microprinting on it that has a serial number of that cartridge. And that officer is issued that cartridge with the serial number on it. So what we need to do is and understand that not just that happens, not just as that confetti deployed along with that taser, but it also records on the computer chip on the taser itself, so we can see how many times it was used. Now, we do have the footage. available right now. We're going to roll it, but I'm going to tell you this is very graphic. This is just as graphic, if not worse, than the last one you saw, where someone actually is being shot here. So take a look at it.
Okay, we just faded it. We've just ended it because the rest of it is just agony, and then the suspect dies. So the reason I have a problem with this is that A, she was very overwhelmed. B, what she was doing, she was working against herself. I think she set up a scenario, almost could have set herself up for failure here. There are other things that come to my mind. Of course, we worked in a large city. We confronted these things, as you did, Ron, every day. And the events there, I'm sure that they don't get a lot of this. She may have been overwhelmed by this, but could she have not have closed on this guy? Could she not have kept tasing him? Could she not have moved away from him and disengaged the taser completely? There was another voice that was yelling in the background of the tape. That was the brother, because the pursuit had terminated at the house, and he was screaming at her. Now she had a tactical problem. Could she not have disengaged and moved herself back so that she had both the brother and the suspect in her sights? She already knew that this was a familiar house. The car was there. The suspect was on the ground. It's hard to let off of what you're in, but maybe that would have been a good situation for this. You might disagree with me, but go ahead and fill us in here.
No, I don't. There's first of all, it is apparent that this situation, as it's unfolded, because it is a dangerous situation, the suspect has fled and created a short pursuit. Normal people don't do that. Dangerous suspects do it. Then he leaves the car and engages in departing the scene, and she tases him to keep him from doing so. And now she is giving him commands, but they're pretty much incoherent because she's obviously very emotional. Now that tells me that this is not something that she has done a lot of, and the community that she's working is probably a pretty tranquil community for the most part. And now she's confronted with a suspect who is dangerous based on what he's doing, and she would have to interpret him as being dangerous. And she's pretty much out of control emotionally. I can't tell, but it would appear to me that the cycle of the taser was continuous, and so he would not be able to lay still because he's being tased significantly. And so it's counterproductive to say don't move when we're continuously tasing somebody. When he makes a movement with his hand under his body, can that be interpreted as a movement to access a gun, where all police officers are trained that suspects will conceal one in the waistband? Most suspects, about 95% of them, don't have a holster. They have a gun in the waistband. And the point I want to make here is that interpretation is reasonable on the part of an officer under a lot of circumstances. But there is too much here that's going on to say if the action of the officer was reasonable. I can't say that.
Well, and that may very well be why she's not sitting in prison right now, is because of all those extenuating circumstances or things that were going on. But it doesn't, we talk about the continuum of force, and one of the very beginning of that actually is the presence of the officer. The officer showing up on the scene and the officer's what we call command presence is actually on the continuum of force in terms of gaining compliance. And when the officer appears to not be in control of the situation, then I think that option is completely lost. And that's another thing that may have contributed to this.
I think I think, frankly, that considering how overwhelmed emotionally she was, I think that the suggestion of closing on the suspect, which could be another risk for an officer, because if the suspect does have a weapon, now you're closer to the threat. But you have an option. Continue what you're doing, close, or get away. If you close on this guy, you're going to have in some sense, a better chance of physically restraining that person, even if it takes putting your gun into the back of his head and explaining to him, if you don't want to be tased, stop what you're doing, keep your hand in your pocket now, since that's obviously where he's got it, or do not put your hands back in your pocket, or I will blow your brains all over this snow, and it's not going to look pretty. You know, there are other options for her, but perhaps, you know, this is the part about, you know, females in law enforcement. I've seen, it's not the dog in the fight, it's the fight in the dog. I've seen some females that are kind of dynamic in the field, but as a general rule, if you take, you know, the great numbers into consideration, there's a disadvantage by the size and strength of a female. This is a man's game. We deal with primarily 90% of the people we deal with are male. So we would consider a male would see a female closing on a suspect, and if I were her partner, I would already feel like I'm being hamstrung because I feel like I need to take care of her as well as take care of the suspect.
That depends on the female.
I just said that.
Yeah,
but as a general rule, I can't get rid of how I feel when I see a female that's involved in a physical altercation with the male. I automatically want to remove the female, and I want to butt stroke the guy. That's my feeling.
I've worked with female officers that were outstanding. They were absolute tigers.
I said the same thing.
And I've worked with male officers that were absolute punks and should be flipping burgers and not be in the police uniform at all.
But I'm talking about in the general sense. And I know, Ron, I know you've got information and things that you'd like to say about that.
But that's a topic for another show, actually, because we're actually getting toward the end of our time here.
That's too bad. Well, then
it is, and so we'll have to revisit that. And actually, females in law enforcement is a very dynamic topic.
How much time do we have? Because I'd like, before we let Ron go, I'd like
4 minutes. We can keep rolling.
I'd like to say something about this. People have said that we're never against the police. Well, we can find fault in police when there's fault to find. Even with this situation, I find that I'm supporting her. Because I know how bad things can get. Things can get out of hand, and things don't always go the way you want things to go. I see some other alternatives. She's very lucky she's not in prison right now, because it could have gone either way in terms of the jury. But here's something that I would like to depart to the people that are listening. If you're following the law, if you're not committing crimes, if you're not disobeying lawful orders from police officers, if you're not fleeing, if you're not fighting with them, if you're not attacking them, if you're not trying to kill them, 99.9% of the time, things like this will never happen. You will not be affected by this. You will not be the deceased person. You don't have to be the person who's been injured and is now turning around and trying to sue a police officer. And a police officer doesn't have to be in this position either, where they're being tried for murder. Because we've said here, things get really messy. Things don't play out with a script like it's a movie.
Police work isn't pretty, is what I was.
This is what happens, and it's a treacherous thing. It's everything will go wrong when you start doing this. And no, your criminal behavior is not acceptable. The rest of the world is not going to accept that, and is not going to deal with you as if you're mainstream with your behavior. Your behavior is not mainstream. Cops are hired for a reason. It's to make sure that people who are doing stuff like this are taken care of, are restrained, and are removed from the community. And sometimes this is what happens.
Well,
Ron?
Let me ask you this, Ken, and Ron also. Do you feel that it was appropriate for this officer to stand trial for this shooting? Regardless of the outcome, do you feel it was appropriate for the DA to file criminal charges against her?
No, I don't. Here's why I'm saying that. First of all, the county attorney has to have the courage and integrity and the ethics to make those decisions himself or herself. And what's happening, there is apparently a contagious ailment that's going around with county attorneys saying, you know what, it's better to file on the officer and let the jury determine that. Well, the officer's life and their job is over. It's much like that situation with Darren Wilson, where the county attorney did make the decision and said Darren Wilson of Ferguson PD hadn't done anything wrong, that he told the truth and all the forensic evidence supported him. But essentially, Darren Wilson's life is over.
Well, that went to a grand jury.
That
went to a grand jury, right?
In a secure environment.
Yes. Yeah, that was a grand jury decision. But Ron, we have to remember that the DA, district attorney, city attorney, county attorney, these are elected positions, and that makes those people who hold those jobs politicians.
That's right.
And, responsible to the
politicians. The word politics tells us everything.
Exactly.
Okay. Poly, Greek word meaning many, ticks, blood-sucking insects.
But on the flip side,
I'm just kidding around with that one.
But on the flip side, they are responsible to their constituents at large. So this is going to happen, and it's going to be happening more and more and more all the time. The politically driven aspect of this, there needs to be some oversight. But yes, at times some of their decisions are not good decisions.
No, and there were plenty of police officers, like the South Carolina police officer who shot the 51-year-old black man in the back, where we should prosecute cops and put them in prison. And I'm all for that. And one of the things that I think is very important here is cameras. Body cameras, I think, are a positive thing, and I think they should be implemented nationwide.
Well, definitely, and that was the topic of our debut show, actually, and they're coming, whether people like it or not. They're coming, and as we said on the show, then we actually think that it will show people a lot more good police work than it will show bad police work, and it'll actually
research and studies back you up on that. It's about 94% of all recorded incidents where there's complaints that the police did the wrong thing are proven to be lies, and the accusations are false. It's about 94%.
So that's a tool that everybody should welcome, especially in law enforcement. I would think that we'd find the money to make sure that gets done right and that it's widespread. Ron, I definitely want to thank you for coming on the show today. We always want to be able to reach out to experts or people who can weigh in with the kind of gravity that your background lends you, and can speak with an educated perspective in terms of some of this stuff and help us kind of break it down and define it so that people can understand, and actually we understand it better ourselves.
And we hope that you'd come back again when we need you.
Okay, and then politics really needs to stay away from law enforcement. It's not very healthy.
No, not at all. And we've seen that throughout our history, at least in this part of the country. We've seen that over and over again. Hey, thanks for calling in, Ron. We appreciate it.
You bet, sir.
Take care, Ron.
Okay, folks, so we're going to have to start wrapping it up here. Again, you can follow us on Instagram at Ride Along Radio Show. You can tweet us at Ride Along Radio. You can send us an email, ridealongradioshow@gmail.com, and like us on Facebook. And actually, a lot of what you guys have been putting out there on social media, either on Twitter or via Instagram or on our Facebook page, actually inform some of the stuff that we address later on this show. When I talk about, well, this was said about the show on social media, that came from either Facebook or a lot of times YouTube. We get a lot of comments on YouTube also, because you can catch the show later on YouTube, and we encourage you to leave comments because it does kind of give us a chance to interact with the audience and kind of take your concerns as viewers or listeners into consideration. So we're going to go ahead and wrap. Thank you for tuning in. I'm George.
And I'm Kent. Thank you for coming on the show with us.
And we'll see you next week. And we're actually going to be covering civilians carrying concealed weapons on the next episode. Thank you.